We've talked a lot about, when we get into politics, this blue wave, the red wave, but what about the green wave? There's a lot of talk out there, the media, about Republicans being in trouble in November. There are some numbers that would back that up. The president, though, has been out there talking about a red wave that is coming. One thing we see, and we see it on the screens just about every day, is the stock market surging, employment rising, unemployment going down, and the Wall Street Journal economist survey that just came out today seeing growth, economic growth, hitting 3% for the year in 2018. So who to believe, what to think, what's most important? We have from PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mitch Rochelle with us. We have from Barron's, senior reporter Mary Childs, and from Real Clear Politics, national political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. So welcome to all of you. Caitlin, let me start with you on this, because one of the things I brought up, we were talking to somebody last hour about this, is that the economy is strong. And the market, today it's kind of flat, but the market obviously has been doing fine and standing up to just about everything. But when I see Republicans either out in person or watching them on TV, I don't see them talking as much about it as you just would think. You think that's an interesting kind of political phenomenon that's going on now?
It's such a fascinating dynamic, and I've talked to lots of Republican campaigns, especially when you look at the Senate campaigns.
Right.
They are talking about kind of cultural issues or social issues or really digging in against the opposition, against the Democrats. And it's really interesting because the economy is good. There is reason for people to feel good about their situation. Yeah. But at the same time, they know that sometimes that doesn't draw voters out, right? You have to get them riled up about something, because it's not clear that you just show up to say thank you if things are going okay.
Maybe especially, Mary, in a midterm, but if you were going to make an economic argument and you're a Republican candidate, you do have a good argument to make. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I wonder also if there's concern about jinxing it in a way, where because there are some things that people like to point to, like, consumers are pretty stretched. There are a couple things out there that people find a bit disconcerting, market participants and analysts. So I wonder if you place too much on it this early, we're still 90 days out, and then it turns, what are you going to say?
Are you seeing signs or talking to people who do see signs of either market tops or cyclical changes in the economy? Is that what you're referring to, sort of?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like a lot of the uncertainty related to tariffs and trade wars and all the turmoil politically, to what extent that actually weighs on the market. Everyone's always like, well, once we clear this hurdle, we're really going to...
I was going to say that to you, Mitch, is like we're almost waiting on a daily basis for these tariffs to hammer us. And I know we have times when, say, the Dow underperforms the Russell or whatever the case may be, where you could say that's because of tariffs. But listen, I think when we started talking about this and the president talked about all these tariffs, and some of them went into place. Chinese retaliated, and, we're still hanging in there, more than hanging in there when it comes to the economy and the markets.
So China and tariffs are interrelated. You have three things that I view as potential potholes in the continued road to recovery.
Okay.
Interest rates, inflation, and the strong U.S. dollar. The strong U.S. dollar could hurt corporate profits. We may see that in the third quarter or the fourth quarter. Inflation and the tariffs could be inflationary, could cause the Fed to want to raise rates more. Who's the big buyer of our $800 billion worth of treasuries that are going to be auctioned over the next couple of quarters? China.
Right.
So these are all interrelated. And if we see interest rates go up, we see inflation, that could cool all of it.
But the funny part is none of that really affects or should affect midterms. So you could still make an argument if you're a Republican about the economy for the midterms. That's more of a 2020 issue, right?
But I'd go to Mary's point, which is if you talk the market on the way up, you own it on the way down.
That's what everybody said to the president.
Degan says that all the time.
And he was still, always wise words. Yeah. But everybody did say that to the president when he was touting the stock market as, be careful, Mr. President. But, he still talks about those things. But I'm saying candidates out on the stump, or even in the president's rallies, he's reluctant for some. I don't know if reluctant is the right word. It's just that there's a different point of emphasis. And it might be working. I don't know.
Right. Well, a midterm is always a referendum on the party in power. So even if you do have, as Republicans are arguing, that they want to sell the tax bill, they want to sell the economy, they also know that just the dynamics of a midterm are such that you have to get people riled up to show up for something. So that's what they're battling. They're also battling the idea that there is so much Democratic enthusiasm on the other side.
Right.
We've seen that effect, especially in some of these House races. In talking about the midterms, though, I think we do have to differentiate between the Senate and the House.
100%. You would see the House going Democratic now, right? And the Senate staying Republican?
Trends are looking that way. So when we're talking about this blue wave or any kind of wave, it would be probably in the House.
Whatever color.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny to hear the president, Mary, talk about a red wave, and nobody really expects what you would define as a red wave. But, you know, he kind of defines things his own way and may say that if we hold on to power, that's red enough for me, you know? So.
Yeah, and I think the market weighs that, certainly. It's trying to kind of differentiate between what the noise says and what they think actually will happen.
Would there be a negative event for the markets right now that you could foresee? Would it be a Democratic takeover of both houses? Is that a negative market event?
I think the market's actually sort of expecting that. It's expecting kind
Even
of a toss-up.
for the Senate?
I'm not sure, but I feel like if you have this kind of gridlock, we're sort of accustomed to that, and in a way it might be a relief for some of having passed a lot of what they think would be market positive already. Then I think they would be, you know, this kind of stasis might actually be welcome.
All right, you guys stay right here. We're going to expand this a little bit, and there's been a debate out there about, you know, what role the president should have in the midterms and where he should play that role. Maybe some districts play for him better than others. Election analyst Henry Olsen joins our conversation now on. And listen to this. You never heard this before, Caitlin. Henry's argument is that the president should be more vocal on Twitter. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that. The people in the president's family, Henry, who would like him to cut back on Twitter, but you think he should go at it even more. Go ahead.
Well, I think that he should use Twitter the way FDR used radio, that back when FDR was elected, the print media was Republican, it hated him,
right,
and he got over them by going directly to the people. He should use Twitter, but perhaps he should use it a little bit differently.
I was only joking about that, but that is actually an interesting argument to make it kind of the Twitter fireside chat. But as Caitlin said, there's the enthusiasm gap seems to be an issue for Republicans. Are you arguing that the president kind of close it with that type of communications? I can't imagine him using it any different than he already does, by the way.
Look, the enthusiasm gap is more among the Democrats who cross parties to vote for him, what I call the Obama-Trump voter, than it is among the base Republican. The base Republican may be unenthusiastic, but they'll show up out of party loyalty. The party switcher, the person who doesn't normally vote Republican, needs to get invested in this race. And that's what Trump can be really effective at. They trust Trump, and they need to transfer that loyalty over to the party. And if that happens, you could very well see the Republicans outperform expectations.
Yeah, that is a good point. And they may, by the way, outperform expectations because there's a long way to go between now and November. We could have a number of economic events. We could have a number of political events. But, Mitch, I've seen those types of people that, you know, that Henry's talking about. And the president personally appeals to those types of voters, those, I guess, swing voters or the old Reagan Democrats or whatever you want to call them. He personally appeals to them very well. The question is, will some of these other candidates in these other races locally appeal to them as much as the president? A lot of those voters, by the way, agree with him on trade, just as an example of policy.
Yeah, and look at all of the folks who voted for Obama and also voted for Trump. When people feel like the candidate's speaking to them about an issue that's important to them,
right,
I think they respond to that. And Twitter's a great vehicle because you can speak directly to them, right? It's right there on your phone. You're walking around.
Trust me, we know.
I hear your voice.
Anybody here not? Caitlin definitely does. Not have Twitter alerts of the president, so when he tweets, like, and you wake up.
On vacation, I do.
Guilty.
You turned it off on vacation? You turned it off on vacation? So it is interesting that how you use this vehicle to communicate, because he's done it, you know, differently than anybody else has, and I just can't see him changing his ways. I mean, he is who he is, right?
He won't change his ways.